It's part 7 of our interview series with Birtles, Graeham, Goble, and Glenn Shorrock, the 3 main guys in the Little River Band. In this one, we talk about the album Time Exposure and working with George Martin. Time Exposure, George Martin.
Yeah.
That must have been a hoot.
It was amazing, actually. We decided that because we'd always recorded our albums in Melbourne, that it was time for a change, for us to go somewhere else so that we wouldn't have the distractions of home while we were recording. So our manager started, scouting for some different producers. We actually also considered Tom Dowd for that album.
Mm-hmm.
We ended up settling on George Martin's Air Studios in Montserrat. And, George agreed to produce an album for us. And it was wonderful being there in Montserrat. It was one of those all-inclusive deals, where you got the studio and your food and accommodation all rolled in for a certain amount of money per week. And so we were there for, something like 4 weeks, 3 to 4 weeks recording that album with Jeff Emmerich was the recording engineer and George Martin producing. So, it was pretty amazing to be working with the man who produced the Beatles.
George Martin, tell me about that.
When we went to Montserrat, it was 6 planes and 43 hours to get to Montserrat Air Studios, and there wasn't even phone connection, and I was keen to get off the island sooner than later. I didn't want to and George said, look, he was only prepared to work 9 hours a day. He said, and I can understand now at my age, I wouldn't be working 18 hours a day like I used to. And I said in my naivety, and I said, well, this is ridiculous. I just can't sit around for the rest of the day. I said, and then I put the idea of, let me have the studio at night when we have dinner and the studio is going to be locked. Give it to me, and I'll work with Beeb and Wayne and whoever I need. And we had our Australian engineer, Ern Rose, who came with us, as well as we had Jeff Emmerich, of course, who did all the Beatles stuff. So that's what happened in that I ended up being able to get out of there. That's not the right term, but I wanted to get the record done. I mean, I spent so little time in Australia. In the 10 years I was in the band, I hardly was ever home. I was working every day of the week, hardly ever saw my family. And the last thing I wanted to do, even though everyone else wanted to do it, I just didn't want to sit on an island and listen to bongo drums from the natives. I just didn't want to do that. I wanted to get my recordings done and get on a plane and go home. So George graciously allowed me to do that. He allowed me free rein. And then he would listen to what we recorded overnight. But largely, and then there were some that we did work on in the day with George as well. But ultimately, the real experience with George was with David Briggs, who was doing all of his guitar work. He would have done the guitar solo on the Night Owls and he would have done all that with George in the day. So George was producing that, but the actual band tracks and all the singing that I would have put down with Wayne and Beeb, all the backgrounds, because at that point it wasn't really Glenn, Beeb and I singing. It was more the harmonies were Wayne, Beeb and I singing most of the time. Then Glenn would put the lead vocal on. That's because it was just we weren't going that well with each other at that point, with Glenn at least in that. And so it was just the most incredible thing for me was to be able to sit at the dinner table next to George or opposite George, and he was so gracious. He would answer any question about the Beatles that I ever wanted to ask. And I remember my favourite Beatles song was always, and still is, We Can Work It Out. That's my favourite. And I said, George, can you tell me anything about that? And he said, I remember it. He said, Lennon and McCartney had a big argument in the studio, and they left on without resolving it. And so McCartney comes in next morning, and he pulls out his guitar and he writes. And George said he was in the studio, and McCartney's saying, try to see it my way, only time will tell if I am right or I am wrong. If we see it your way, like the verse. And he said, without batting an eye, Lennon picked up his guitar and said, life is very short and there's no time for fussing and fighting, my friend. And they just said, there it is, and we recorded it. And that's a true story that George Martin told me. And I thought, what genius is that? I mean, out of an argument came that song, and Lennon had the genius to be able to respond in the moment. That middle eight just said, McCartney said, what do you think of this? And he didn't even say, just picked up and gave him the middle eight, and then they recorded it. But there were many stories like that George was gracious to tell us. And even Jeff Emerick, who was a wonderful piano player, he often would be playing all this classical music in the studio. And then when I was recording my acoustic guitar, they put these Neumann mics, and it was going through like a Fairchild compressor. I didn't know anything about this. But when they put the mic on my guitar and I just strummed my acoustic guitar, it sounded exactly like Hide Your Love Away or one of the Beatles songs, If I Fell or something. And I thought, these are the guys that got those sounds. And now my acoustic guitar sounds, because it's the mic placement, it's the same gear, it's the same stuff that the Beatles recorded into. Like, it's just unbelievable when you think about it now. But all I was thinking about was, I want to go home. You see, I didn't enjoy the moment. Everyone else went down the beach. They went out on a boat with George. He took them out fishing or down to the beach or something. I didn't do any of that. I was sleeping and working and planning my exit. And everyone else went for barbecues and down on the beach and enjoyed it. And this is the regret in my life. Even when I was in New York, I was so tired. I didn't go and see the Statue of Liberty. Everyone else did. I just said, I can get 4 hours sleep here. That's what I'm going to do.
There's a resurgence for those old songs. A resurgence for wanting to have Graeme Goble, Bea Birtles, and Glenn Shorrock on the same stage at the same time. I want to thank the guys for talking to us. Make sure you comment on our videos, subscribe to our channel, and share our videos. I'm John Beaudin from Rocky Street Music. Take care of yourself.